Hey everybody, today is Saturday, January 2nd, so I hope you all had a great Christmas and a nice New Year. I know it was a very different sort of Christmas and New Year's celebration than usual. There weren't a lot of big parties or things like that, but I know we had a good time with our family and we missed seeing you all in person, although we saw some of you at the Christmas Eve virtual gathering, and that was so nice to see you. So back during the season of Advent, which is the weeks that are leading up to Christmas, I read a few books on videos for you guys to go along with the different themes of the week of Advent. So like those themes are hope and peace, and then joy and love. And I read books that went with hope and peace, but then I got super busy and did not get around to reading books that had to do with joy and hope, even though I meant to. And now the season of Advent is over, but did you know that we are still technically in the season of Christmas? So throughout history, Christians all over the world have tended to celebrate Christmas not just as one single day, but as a 12-day long season of celebration. That's why you guys have probably heard that song about the 12 days of Christmas, because traditionally that's how long Christmas is celebrated. So I don't know about you guys, your mom and dads may have already put away your Christmas decorations. I did do that just today, so it doesn't really feel very Christmassy around here anymore. But I am still going to read you this book that is perfect for right now, because there's another holiday that we never talk about, and we don't really celebrate it as a holiday, but again, it's a special day in the history of the church, and that's a day called Epiphany. And that's when the season of Christmas officially ends in church history. An Epiphany would be January 6th, which is next Wednesday, so just 4 days from now. And it's when throughout the church we remember, when I say the church, I mean like all churches all over the world, many churches on Epiphany are remembering the story of the wise men who came to visit Jesus. And these were wise men who came from different parts of the world, but they were told in a dream to come visit Jesus. And so I'm going to read you a story called The Greatest Gift, the story of the other wise man. And so traditionally we remember that there are 3 wise men who came to visit Jesus. And so this story kind of adds in a 4th, and it's just a fun, interesting story. So I'm going to move over here so that, well, actually I'm just going to turn the camera is what I'm going to do so that I can sit here and hold this and read it to you guys. So this is written by, it says Retold by Susan Summers. So it starts out with this big map of what we call the ancient Near East, which is where Israel is. All right, and this is a really big book, so I'm only going to be able to show you one page at a time. So there's that page. And I'll move it over to this one. Actually, I can kind of keep it on the picture here, I guess. In the days when Augustus Caesar ruled the Roman Empire and King Herod reigned in Jerusalem, there lived in the city of Ecbatana, among the mountains of Persia, a man named Artaban. From the roof of his house, Artaban could look out over rising battlements of black and white, crimson and blue, red and silver, to the hill where the emperor's palace glittered above the city of Ecbatana like a jewel. Around his house grew a wonderful garden filled with flowers and fruit trees, watered by rushing streams. I'm trying to set up a little platform here for me to set this book on. There we go. All right. Watered by flowers, or filled with flowers and fruit trees, watered by rushing streams, and made musical by countless birds. High above the tallest trees in the garden stood a tower, and from its window a lamp often shone late into the night, for it was here that Artaban worked. He was a follower of the faith of Zoroaster, studying the eternal struggle between the forces of good and evil and explaining the secrets of nature, above all, the secrets of the night sky. So it sounds like he did not really worship Israel's one true God. Artaban had 3 friends, Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, and for all 4 men, knowledge of the stars was the highest form of learning. One spring night, the 4 companions were looking up at the sky when they observed 2 great planets. Move this out so that you can see it a little bit more fully. They observed 2 great planets draw together in the sign of the fish, and a new star shining more brightly than any they had ever seen. The men knew from their studies that this star signified the birth of a great teacher who was to be born among the Jews. There and then they decided to follow the star. They arranged to meet up together at a place far away by the temple of the 7 spheres in Babylon. From there they would set out with a caravan of supplies and follow the star to Jerusalem to pay homage to the child. Quickly, Artaban arranged his affairs. He sold his beautiful house with its fragrant gardens, and he bought 3 jewels, a sapphire, a ruby, and a pearl, to carry as a tribute to the newborn child. On the eve of his departure, he said farewell to his old father and knelt to receive his blessing. Before dawn, even before the first bird had awoken, Artaban went down to the stable where Vazda, his favorite horse, stood saddled and bridled in her stall, shaking her bit and pawing at the ground impatiently. He swung himself into the saddle and was soon riding swiftly westward. He had to reach the temple of the 7 spheres on the appointed night, and the journey was long and hard. Artaban knew Vazda's strength and pushed forward, riding late into the night and starting long before sunrise every morning. Each evening, as soon as the sun sank behind the hills, the bright new star shone down on him. Finally, after 10 days and 10 nights, he saw before him the great walls of Babylon. At last, in 3 hours' time, he would be at the temple of the 7 spheres. As they trotted past a grove of date palms outside the city walls, Vazda started. She lowered her head and gave a soft whinny, then stood stock still, quivering in every muscle before a dark object lying in the shadow. Artaban dismounted. In the dim starlight, he could see the figure of a man lying across the road. He leaned down to touch the man's head. The man gave a ghostly sigh and clutched at his robe with long, bony fingers. Artaban's heart leapt in his throat. The man needed help, but how could he stop tonight of all nights? God of truth and purity, Artaban prayed, direct me in the holy path, the way of wisdom which you know better than any mortal. Then he fetched water, mixing it with some of the healing herbs which he always carried. He laid the sick man's head in the crook of his elbow and slowly poured the liquid into his parched mouth. Hour after hour he poured, a little at a time, then waited and poured again. At last the sick man's strength returned. "Who are you?" he asked, "and why have you brought back my life?" "I am Artaban of the city of Ecbatana, and I am going to Jerusalem in search of the one who was to be born King of the Jews. I dare not stay with you any longer, for the caravan that has been waiting for me may depart without me. But see, here is all that I have left of bread and wine, and here is a portion of healing herbs." The sick man raised his trembling hand solemnly to heaven. "May the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob bless you and bring you peace. Now take heed. The Messiah will not be born in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem of Judah. May the Lord bring you in safety to that place, because you have had pity on me and saved my life. It was already past midnight. Artaban rode quickly across the silent plain, but when he reached the temple of the seven spheres, he could find no trace of his friends. Then, by the edge of a terrace, he saw a little cairn of bricks, and under them a piece of parchment. He caught it and read, "We can delay no longer. We go to find the King of Kings." Artaban stared out across the desert. "How can I reach Judah?" he asked himself, "with no food and a tired horse? I must return to Babylon, sell all my sapphire, and buy camels and food for the journey. I may never catch up with my friends. Only God knows whether I shall miss the King of Kings because I stopped to help a dying man." So Artaban returned to Babylon, where he sold his glittering sapphire and his beloved horse, Fazda, in exchange for a caravan of camels. Then he set out across the dreary desert. Dark ledges of rock rose up around him like the bones of ancient monsters. Shifting hills of treacherous sand skirted his route. By day, a fierce heat blistered the earth so that no living thing could move. By night, jackals prowled and barked in the distance, and an icy chill fell over the dunes. But he pressed on, faithfully following the bright new star until, as the sick man had told him, it shone above the village of Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Let's see here, I'll show you this picture first. Artaban drew near to the village, full of hope. Now at last he could give his pearl and his ruby to the king. But the streets were deserted, and he wondered whether the men had gone up to the hill pastures to bring down their sheep. Then, from the open door of a stone cottage, he heard someone singing softly. He entered and found a young woman singing her baby to sleep. Yes, the woman told him. 3 strangers from the east had appeared a few days earlier. They had said that a star had guided them to the place where Joseph of Nazareth was lodging with his wife and her newborn son, and they had paid great reverence to the child and given him many gifts. But, she went on, the travelers had disappeared again, and they say that the man from Nazareth has fled to Egypt with his family. Now there seems to be a spell over the village. People even say that Roman soldiers are coming to enforce a new tax, and the men have driven our flocks and herds high up into the hills to escape it. Artaban listened to her gentle voice, and the baby reached up to touch his face. Suddenly there came a noise of wild confusion in the streets, a shrieking and wailing of women's voices, a clashing of swords, and a desperate cry. "The soldiers! The soldiers of Herod! They are killing our children!" The young woman's face went white with terror. Clutching her baby to her chest, she crouched in the darkest corner, covering him with her robe. Artaban strode over to the doorway. The tip of his white cap almost touched the lintel. When the soldiers reached the cottage, Artaban summoned their captain and said, "I am alone here, and I will give you this jewel if you will leave me in peace." Then he showed them the ruby, glistening in his palm like a great drop of blood. The captain's eyes widened with greed, and he grabbed the jewel. "March on," he cried. And as the soldiers left, Artaban turned to the east and prayed, "God of truth, forgive my lie. I have said the thing that is not to save the life of a child, and now 2 of my gifts are gone. Shall I ever see the King of Kings?" But from the shadows behind him came the woman's voice saying, "Because you have saved my little one, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord give you peace now and always." So Artaban left with the woman's blessing and made his way to Egypt, asking everywhere for news of the family from Bethlehem. but he could find no trace of them. By now, the star had vanished from the night sky, and he had no idea where to continue his search. So he went to a wise old Hebrew rabbi to ask for advice. "My son," said the rabbi, "our scriptures foretold that the King of Kings would be despised and rejected by men. He will not be found in a palace nor among the rich and powerful. If you seek him, look among the poor and the lowly, the sorrowful and the sick." The years passed, and Artaban traveled on, always searching in the poorest places for the family from Bethlehem. He passed through towns where people were crying with hunger. He passed through cities where they were dying of plague. And though he found no King of Kings to worship, he found many to help. Wherever he went, he fed the hungry and clothed the naked. He healed the sick, and he visited those in prison. And his years went by more swiftly than a weaver's shuttle that darts back and forth through the loom, while the web grows and the invisible patterns are completed. From time to time, he would stop and take out his pearl, the last of his gifts. And as he gazed on it, he would wonder whether he would ever meet the King of Kings. 33 years had passed since Artaban had first seen the star and set out on his journey. Now, worn and weary, he traveled to Jerusalem to make one final search. He arrived during the season of the Passover, and the city was thronged with people who had come for the feast. But this year there was a strange sense of foreboding in the air. All around Artaban, sandals clattered and thousands of bare feet shuffled over the stones as the crowds were swept along to the Damascus gate. "What is happening?" said Artaban. "Haven't you heard?" replied a young man. "There's going to be a crucifixion. 2 robbers are to be crucified, and another man, a man called Jesus of Nazareth. They say he has said and done many wonderful things, and everyone loves him greatly. But the priests and the elders say that he must be killed because he calls himself the Son of God." Then Artaban knew that this must be the King of Kings, for whom he had been searching all these years. His heart thumped and his mind raced. Perhaps if he offered his pearl to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, he might save the man's life. He hurried toward the Damascus gate. But just beyond the entrance to the guardhouse, a troop of soldiers came down the street dragging a young girl with a torn dress and disheveled hair. As Artaban paused to look at her, she broke away from the hands of her tormentors and threw herself at his feet. "Have pity on me," she cried. "Save me. My father was also a follower of Zoroaster, and I see from your clothing that you are of the same faith. Now my father is dead, and I am to be sold as a slave to pay for his debts. Help me, please." Artaban looked on the girl and trembled. For a third time he had to choose between keeping his jewel as a gift for the King of Kings or surrendering it to save a fellow human being. Yet he knew that to rescue this helpless girl would be a true deed of love. Artaban took his priceless pearl from its pouch and placed it in the girl's hand. "Here is your ransom, daughter. It is the last of the treasures I was keeping for the King of Kings, who is now to be crucified." As he spoke, the sky grew black and tremors ran through the street, which heaved like someone in pain. Houses rocked, stones fell and crashed into the street, dust clouds filled the air. The soldiers fled in terror, reeling like drunken men, and Artaban and the girl took refuge beside the wall of the guardhouse. The earth gave one final shudder, and a heavy tile, loosened from the roof, fell and struck Artaban on the head. As the girl bent over him, fearing that the old man was dead, there came a voice through the darkness, very small and still, like music sounding from a distance. The voice said, "Peace be with you, Artaban. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in distress, you comforted me. As often as you did these things to the least of these my children, you did them for me." A calm radiance lit up the face of Artaban, and a long last sigh of relief left his lips. His journey was ended. At last he had found his king. And that is the end. So, I really love that book because even though it's a made-up story, it shows us that we also can meet Jesus, the King of Kings, as we seek him and as we love other people. And those words that were said by Jesus, kind of in a vision to Artaban at the end, that whenever you took care of those who were hungry or in need and showed love to other people, you did it to me. So when we show love, we are actually loving Jesus. And that is such a gift for us and for those around us. And so even though I missed reading you books about joy and love, I hope you can see that that book can give us a lot to think about that has to do with the joy and the love that is to be found in knowing Jesus. And that's a great thing to think about as we enter a new year and as we leave the Christmas season and think about kind of what's next to come. So I hope that that's encouraging to you. I miss seeing you face to face, and I hope you enjoyed this book. All right, bye.